All right, so lesson 4 is entitled "Two Are Better Than One" by our author, and we'll read through as we have been from the New King James first, and then from the New International. Beginning in verse 1. Then I returned and considered all the oppression that is done under the sun, and look, the tears of the oppressed, but they have no comforter. On their side, on the side of their oppressors, there is power, but they have no comforter. Therefore I praise the dead who are already dead, more than the living, who are still alive. Yet better than both is he who has never existed, who has not seen the evil work that is done under the sun. Again I saw that for all toil and every skillful work a man is envied by his neighbor. This also is vanity and grasping for the wind. The fool holds his hands and consumes his own flesh. Better a handful with quietness than both hands full, together with toil and grasping for the wind. Then I returned and I saw vanity under the sun. There is one alone without companion. He has neither son nor brother, yet there is no end to all his labors, nor is his eye satisfied with riches. But he never asks, for whom do I toil and deprive myself of good? This also is vanity and a grave misfortune. Two are better than one, because they have a good reward for their labor. For if they fall, one will lift up his companion. But woe to him who is alone when he falls, for he has no one to help him up. Again, if two lie down together, they will keep warm. But how can one be warm alone? Though one may be overpowered by another, two can withstand him, and a threefold cord is not quickly broken. Better a poor and wise youth than an old and foolish king who will be admonished no more. For he comes out of prison to be king, although he was born poor in his kingdom. I saw all the living who walk under the sun. They were with the second youth who stands in his place. There was no end of all the people over whom he was made king. Yet those who come afterward will not rejoice in him. Surely this also is vanity and grasping for the wind. Again I looked and I saw all the oppression that was taking place under the sun. I saw the tears of the oppressed, and they have no comforter. Power was on the side of their oppressors, and they have no comforter. And I declared that the dead who had already died are happier than the living who are still alive. But better than both is the one who has never been born, who has not seen the evil that is done under the sun. And I saw that all toil and all achievement spring from one person's envy of another. This too is meaningless, a chasing after the wind. Fools fold their hands and ruin themselves. Better one handful with tranquility than two handfuls with toil and chasing after the wind. Again I saw something meaningless under the sun. There was a man all alone. He had neither son nor brother. There was no end to his toil, yet his eyes were not content with his wealth. For whom am I toiling, he asked, and why am I depriving myself of enjoyment? This too is meaningless, a miserable business. Two are better than one, because they have a good return for their labor. If either of them falls down, one can help the other up. But pity anyone who falls and has no one to help them up. Also, if two lie down together, they will keep warm. But how can one keep warm alone? Though one may be overpowered, two can defend themselves. A cord of 3 strands is not quickly broken. Better a poor but wise youth than an old but foolish king who no longer knows how to heed a warning. The youth may have come from prison to the kingship, or he may have been born in poverty within his kingdom. I saw that all who lived and walked under the sun followed the youth, the king's successor. There was no end to all the people who were before them, but those who came later were not pleased with the successor. This too is meaningless, a chasing after the wind. Okay, so we've talked about this the last couple of weeks, that we kind of see this cycle that Solomon is going through as he writes this. He tends to go into cynicism, and then he'll pop back out of it for a second, then go back into it again. And definitely we see him starting this book off still in his cynical mode. And the author makes the point here that there's 3 things that Americans value. That's mobility, convenience, and privacy. And of the 3, privacy is most cherished. What do you guys think of that? You agree with that? I see people shaking their head. Yeah, obviously our mobility, we love our cars, right? Our ability to drive around the country or go wherever we want to go. And boy, convenience. We got fast food places everywhere. Remember one time when we were growing up, when the kids were growing up, our microwave broke. And Colton was like, how are we going to eat? You know, so it's like we get so used to the conveniences of life. But then privacy. Why do we crave privacy? Norma?
For me, it's associated with individual freedom, the idea of the individual. Whereas in the groupthink societies, communist, etc., everything is the group. There is no privacy. You do everything together, and everything's open to that.
So when we bring this to our relationship with God, is there privacy there that we should have? And to your point, Christianity is a group thing in a sense, but who's accountable for me? Me, right? We're individually accountable. Think about what about privacy and praying? Did Jesus have anything to say about that? Yeah, with the whole point being he was contrasting against the Pharisees, right? That they were praying to be seen, and he says, no, you should go in your closet and pray. So, I think that from a Christian point of view, there's an individual relationship that we develop with Christ, and there are things that we're not to flaunt in front of others, that we should be doing privately. Then he goes into a little discussion here about some of the social media and all that kind of stuff. And he makes the point, the problem comes, however, when we substitute electronic relationships for physical ones. And don't you think that has become a problem? I don't know if you've seen, I can't remember what commercial it is, but there's like a 20-something-year-old girl who's feeling sorry for her parents because they only have 3 friends on Facebook and she's got thousands. But they were out with another couple riding bicycles outside or something. It was just this whole point of this electronic age we live in and how many likes we get and friends we got online versus actually interacting with others as we should. In the last sentence there, he says, yes, we are very connected, yet very much alone. So there can be loneliness even in this electronic age, can't we? Can have tons of friends on Facebook or wherever and still be disconnected from them. Who in here knows who Rip Van Winkle is? I saw this and I said, these kids over here probably have no clue who Rip Van Winkle is. He's a guy that fell asleep for a while and woke up and the world was different. So he makes the point here about Rip Van Winkle. He says, wouldn't believe how well we relate to technology and how poor we relate to people. And I thought about that telling off of my kids this morning. So when cell phones first came out and texting started, now for some of you that are younger, back when texting first started, you had to pay if you texted more than a certain amount, or if you texted to somebody in another network, you had to pay for all of them. So you had to make sure your friends were on the same network as you were. But I remember Kaylee, she's like, Dad, we got to get texting. I'm like, why do we need texting? You just pick up the phone and talk. And she says, well, texting avoids the awkward pauses. And when I thought about that, what does that really mean? That means, well, that you don't have to learn how to interact socially, do you? So if you can text, and it does, you don't see people's faces, you don't see how they react, and people will definitely hide behind texting. Well, they'll text things or Facebook something that they never say to you face to face. And so, as we think about the point of this lesson of how we need to develop the relationships that are in our lives properly. So, getting into the text here, the first section we see Solomon with 3 observations. So his first observation is about oppression. So he sees those that are being oppressed. And do we still see that today? We see this, he makes the point, there's nothing new under the sun. So, yeah, we see, and we won't talk about too much. We have a question on it. We'll hold off till then. But we still see oppression today, whether it's through governments. It can be through wealth. People, some that have more wealth than others, and it can be through power or perceived power that people are oppressed or are taken advantage of. But boy, Solomon really gets into his cynicism here, doesn't he? So he sees this, and what does he say?
It's almost like he just gives up. There's nothing we can do about this. It's just better than you didn't even live.
Yeah, his first point is, I declare that the dead who have already died are happier than the living who are still alive, so the dead are better off. Then he moves on, well, it'd just be better if he was never born. But better than both is the one who has never been born, who has not seen the evil that is done under the sun. Yeah, and when we think about that from our perspective, as a Christian, we're told that we're going to have to deal with this kind of stuff, right? That personally expect some persecution. Why? Where are we? And what are we up against? Norma?
Yeah, we're just sojourners in a very, very hostile, very different world than God actually created.
Yeah, we're living in a world that we don't truly belong, right? The world, the carnality that's out there, the influences of Satan, and as a result, things are going to happen. I mean, when we see sin in action, don't we? And the consequences of sin in action, and that can be depressing. It can cause us to have this. When you think how many of us, I know I've said this, and maybe I should watch it to think about it. It's like, man, I feel sorry for my grandkids, how my grandkids are going to have to grow up. Because we see this, and we're concerned about our children and our grandchildren and the world that they're going to have to live in, and the things that are going on. But it hasn't changed a lot, has it? The world, it keeps on going the way it's been going. Norma?
This sounds a lot like what you hear of people that are getting ready to commit suicide, or that type of this hopelessness. And it's interesting that the author brought this up under the subject of social media and all of that, because this is an epidemic that is sweeping young people in the nation. The suicide rates and stuff, and these are the same kinds of issues that they have in their mind, and nothing new under the sun.
Yeah, that's a good point, and it shows again, like we talked about as we're going through these lessons, when life without God in it as it should be, it will take you down those paths, won't it? When you're heading through life and you don't have God and you're not living by and guided by God's ways, then this is where you're going to end up. Because when you look out there, you may see a little good, but you see a lot bad, don't you? And we have to process that and deal with it. Okay, anybody have any other comments on the first 3 verses there? All right?
I think I was watching last night a show, and it was about a gal that was trying to decide whether to get an abortion or not. And this was exactly, I can't bring a child into the world like this. And it's this mentality that, again, is something that we need to be the exact opposite of, and then teach that and be an example of it.
Okay. Anybody else? Robert?
I'm sorry I haven't been here for the beginning of your study, but I was curious about something. And I don't mind your use of the word cynical. I think that's a very great word to use there. Do you think Solomon is actually suggesting that he feels like he would have been better off never born, or is he just using the expression that life is hard, and if you were never born, you wouldn't have to go through these things?
I hope the second one is correct. I don't know, to be perfectly honest, but like we've taught, he pops back and forth. He gets real cynical. Then he'll say, "Well, but with God, I see some good, and I see this." So I hope not.
Well, the previous comment that you made about hope, when the people of the world who don't have God don't have hope, they don't have something to live for, and I believe that Solomon very much was rooted in God and very much had the hope of God. So I do think it's more I don't think it's the George Bailey, It's a Wonderful Life, wishing he had never been born kind of a thing. I think he's just saying there would be an advantage to one who had never been born because they would have never had to go through that. But because we have hope, we can move beyond.
Good point. All right, anybody else? All right, so the next section here that the author calls it rank. He calls it rank rivalry and this a dog eat dog mindset. But he shows two extremes and kind of in the middle here. So the first one in verse 4 is the workaholic. And you see what's driving the workaholic according to verse 4. That springs from what? Yeah, the NIV says one person's envy of another. Yeah, we want to keep up with the Joneses. That you always hear that this drive that, well, if such and such has got it, I need it. So what do I have to do to get it? Yeah, and that can be a powerful driver. Then the flip side is the lazy. Fools fold their hands and ruin themselves. So that there's those that then just that don't do nothing and expect the handout, so to speak. That's not good either. And then in the middle there is verse 6. Better one handful with tranquility than two handfuls with toil and chasing the wind. What's another word for what he says there? Contentment. And we know that we see in the New Testament, Paul has a really good attitude about this kind of stuff, doesn't he? Remember what he said? Did he say, I can have a lot, I can have nothing. I can do. He shows some contrast that he's experienced in his life, but why does he achieve contentment? Paul, anyway. Because of the Lord, right? His relationship with Christ. We see the thorn in the flesh thing. We talked about that last week. That the grace is sufficient to get me through that. And if we can, I think it's all perspective setting here. Now, in this case, Solomon does set us a good perspective. That this kind of one handful with tranquility. That there's a recognition. There's things we need. Right? There's things we need in life, but do we need everything that we're spending such time and focus on? And I think that's the difference there, right, Norma?
I was thinking about it. Even God took a day off.
Good point. Good point. Then the author there under that number 1 in point B1 on page 20 is a handful of contentment is peace is better than 2 fists full of clawing and climbing to the top of the ladder. Yeah, that's a good point, isn't it? And I think that and especially for the younger folks that are out here getting jobs and all this, we've talked about this in a previous lesson. That there's this temptation to want to do so good and to make money and to strive to reach the top. And there's some value there. There's value in gaining responsibility and being a leader in your work, but keep it in perspective. I think that's what Solomon is teaching us here. Keep it in perspective. One handful with contentment is better than 2 where you're doing all the striving and toiling. Norm?
In other words, do it the right way. There's value in being righteous and getting to the top. As a result of being righteous, doing the right thing, you're going to be the most valued worker. You're going to be the person who's trusted. Everybody that's ever hired anybody knows that that's the kind of person that you want. So just be that. And God will, that's the seed planting. God will provide the rest.
And people will notice that too, won't they? Because we've all, any of us at least have been out and worked in corporations and stuff. We've seen people that have gotten there, that got there the wrong way. And people know that, and they know that and don't respect it, do they? They may be there, but they don't gain the respect that they need, that they should have because of the way they got where they are. So that's a very good point, Norm. We should behave as God would behave, have us behave in the workplace, right? And let happen what happens. All right, so the next couple of verses there, is in verses 7 and 8, he calls is personal disillusionment. And he says, he makes the point here, the success-driven person usually fails to find happiness. And why? He says, because he never slows down, because he never has enough, and because he never asks the crucial question, why? And again, that's the picture of a workaholic, isn't it? That never slows down, never has enough, and it really thinks about, why am I doing this? Is this really worth it? And that's a trap. That's a trap that that we can fall into. Like, for whom am I toiling, asking? Why am I depriving myself of enjoyment? It's like, go out, do what makes me happy, but Solomon says this too is meaningless. The NIV says a miserable business. He uses that vanity word a lot too. But and have you known? I think all of us have probably known people like this that have spent. I mean, I had a boss once that he worked constantly, and his justification was, well, I take a 2-week vacation every year with my family. And pretty much that was all the time he spent with his family, his 2-week vacation. Think he had things off a little bit? Yeah, and unfortunately for the worker, sometimes that makes it hard when you have a boss that works like that, if those expectations start rolling down on you, that he expects you to work that way because he works that way. Those are things we deal with in the workplace, and those balances that we need to get in place. But he ends here, he says, Jesus taught that true happiness and a life of peaceful contentment can only be had when you build your life around genuine relationships, God and others. Then he points out Matthew 22, which is love the Lord your God with all your heart and so on, and your neighbor as yourself. And again, he keeps bringing us back. We've talked about to the simple things, doesn't he? Love God, love your neighbors, have one handful with tranquility. There's nothing wrong with having the one handful, but have it with tranquility and have it with God in your life, and you're going to be much better off. And that's the wisdom he's sharing with us here. All right, anybody have any comments on that little section? All right, we'll move on into verses 9 through 12 here. So the verse calls this here Solomon's survival counsel. So he says this verse, this section A here, 2 are better than 1. True friends help us find objectivity. They temper our dogmatism. They offer valuable second opinions. These kind of friends tell us what we need to hear more than what we want to hear. I think about that Emperor's New Clothes story. Anybody, if you know that one, a true friend is going to be there for you. But if you're getting a little off path, they're going to help straighten you out, aren't they? And that's what we should want out of friendships. And the flip side of that is that's what we should give as friends as well, right? We should provide that to those that we're friends with. So he goes into several reasons here. So first one is mutual return when we labor. Doesn't it feel good to work with somebody to accomplish stuff? I mean, when we had the big work day up here, we had, 20, 25 people here, and we got a lot done. And I think that there was a sense of accomplishment there. Now, could we come up here and done it all by ourselves one at a time? Yeah, we could. It would probably taken months and months to get it done, but we could. I know Norm and Ken have been door painting together. It's just kind of it's more fun. For one thing, it tends to go quicker. And you have somebody you're working with. It just makes a lot of sense. Then mutual encouragement when we're weak. We all have times where we need to be picked up, right? That we have a bad day, and if we've got a good friend we can call, or one that notices that and does something to build us up, then that's good for both of us. The next one he says is mutual support when we're vulnerable. And then this is he's talking about the keeping warm thing. And physically that's true, right? 2 people laying together going to keep each other warm. You by yourself, you want. But he goes a little deeper here in relating it to the warmth of a friend. That the friends can provide warmth. And he's got some examples here. Your first day on a new job, a surgical waiting room, the unemployment line, a new school. It's just that there's things we face in life that you just having a little bit of support makes it a lot easier to go through, doesn't it? And especially if the friend may have gone through it already and they can provide that kind of support. So again, we should look, there's nothing wrong for us desiring that out of friends, but again, as friends, we should desire to give that as well. A mutual protection when attacked. Now, I didn't realize that foxholes were dug for 2. Our military guys can comment on that I guess it makes sense. You want two guys in the foxhole, you dig it quicker, I guess, to get in it. We see that Jesus, sent his followers out in pairs, and he makes the point that when a friend says, "I believe in you," how good that can make us feel and how that can help us. And he points out some examples of biblical friends here. Elijah and Elisha, Naomi and Ruth, David and Jonathan, Paul and Timothy, Paul and Luke, Barnabas and John Mark. To me, the ultimate example is David and Jonathan, isn't it? To me, when I look, all these pairs are obviously appropriate, but just the friendship they had, because there was conflict going on there that they were dealing with to maintain that friendship. And we saw how even after their death, and David taking care of some of the children, right, that were from that family after they were gone, and how that friendship extended beyond even Jonathan's death. So, and that's a true friend. So, anybody have anything you want to add there on that section? All right. So then we're continuing in verse 13, talking about this king. Better a poor but wise youth than an old foolish king who no longer knows how to heed a warning. I had a couple of references in Proverbs. In Proverbs 25, verse 12. Flip over there. Proverbs 25. Like an earring of gold and an ornament of fine gold, it is a wise rebuker to an obedient ear. And then in Proverbs 19, verse 20, listen to counsel and receive instruction, that you may be wise in your latter days. We see this contrast here, who no longer knows how to heed a warning, that is unwilling to take advice. This is somebody that's got to the point they think they know it all, and they don't need help or advice from anyone else. And it's kind of interesting that Solomon brings this up, isn't it? We know he had the wisdom. We see some of the things he did, but at least he's coming back to it here, that it's important that we are willing to receive a warning, that we don't get to the point when it comes to anything, whether it's mowing the grass or something at work or something here or just in life in general, the point of, well, I know it all and I could never change, or I could never listen to what anybody else has to say about whatever it is, that we have actually become a fool. That's what the contrast he's making here, isn't it? That someone that becomes this way has actually become foolish, as he describes the king here. Then he has a little bit of a dissertation here on politics. I thought when I was reading through this, he's kind of saying, well, here comes the new guy, right? The new guy, he may have come from prison, or he may have been poor, but the new guy comes along, and there for a little while, what happens? Everybody likes him, don't they? Everybody likes the new guy. What happens after time goes by? There was no end to all the people who were before him, but those who came later were not pleased with the successor. This too is meaningless, a chasing of the wind. That you see this, we see this all the time in politics, right? You get tired of the old president, senator, or whatever. The new person comes along. People think it's going to save the day. Get them in there. Do they save the day? No. Their promises are just as bad as other guys. It's a cycle that keeps repeating itself. And I thought, when I was thinking about this one, since we've been down in Alabama for a few days, we got to watch The Lion King. So if you hadn't, that was Kaylee's favorite movie. Now she's making it her kid's favorite movie. But we thought about the song, and one of the songs in there is "I Just Can't Wait to Be King." If you've watched the movie, you'll recognize that song. And you think about some of the words. No one saying do this, do that. I'm going to be playing all the time. No need for advice from, if you remember the little bird that was flying around trying to keep him straight in the movie. And that's kind of, that was Simba when he was a little guy's view of being king, right? Well, I can do whatever I want. Nobody's going to tell me what to do. I don't have to listen to anybody. I'll just do what I want. And that was kind of what I pictured. It came to my mind when we were going through this, when I read through this section of how that this view of kingship or politics or whatever that people tend to have, and in the end, it doesn't really work out that way. So, anybody have any other comments on that one before we get into the questions? All right.
Hey, Jeff.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
It's interesting how he brings out Rehoboam, who saw his son, and how he was everyone's choice, but then he made bad decisions, and then they all left with Jeroboam.
Yeah. And how long did that take? Not long, was it?
Not long. I
Yes.
don't remember. He was still a young man.
Yeah. Yeah, and you wonder if that was a foreboding, or what that if he had any intent of talking about his own kids when he was doing that or not. But it sure worked out that way for sure. Anybody else? All right, first question. Discuss the irony of technology. While providing greater connectedness, we are more disconnected and lonely than ever. How can we help our kids find the balance between social media and meaningful relationships? This is really an important question, isn't it? Especially for those that are raising children in our day and time. Norm, eh?
Example, that would be, if you're addicted to it, whatever it is you're addicted to, your children are going to have a good possibility of being addicted also. So you got to start there, but after that, I mean, there's got to be some teaching involved. There's got to be directing to the right path. Use of wisdom.
Okay. Anybody else? Shirley?
I say keep them off social media.
So she said keep them off social media. Take their phones away, or don't give them a phone till they get to a certain age. Yeah, and you're right. We laugh about it, but then we have to be careful about not doing it ourselves. Yeah, how many go out to eat? How many families do you sit in there see they're all on their phone? And what's the example he used in here somewhere about kids texting themselves from the front seat to the back seat of the car, or from the upstairs to the downstairs of the house? That's just, it's the world we live in. Yeah, and I think that we try to do a good job of this here, but as parents, we need to put them in situations where they can interact with other Christians, don't we? Where put your phone away, go play soccer, go play volleyball, go come to the work day, do something, put them in situations to interact with other Christians. Daniel?
That's a really good point, and I think that often I've been in congregations where you do have a lot of young people, but they're never put in situations to interact outside of services. And really, if you read about the early church, you see them interacting outside of services. I mean, it doesn't really mention, children or kids, but there is interaction between Christians outside of services, and that's a critical part we often miss, that I think can be really helpful here in helping to socialize and helping to show kids that there are expectations of having that physical relationship and that physical contact that will later help them down the road to develop good relationships as adults.
Yeah, good point. Anybody else? All right, second question. Solomon saw those with money, influence, and power oppressing those without. In what ways does this still happen? Ken?
We see it in politics a lot.
Politics?
That's what I was thinking of. There's other ways too.
The bullying epidemic in schools, yeah.
Yeah, the putting themselves in a place of power. Money has always been those with against those without. Right? That's always been, and will probably always be. Okay. Number 3. There's no hiding Solomon's cynicism in verses 2 and 3, yet people have always been cynical, thinking their times to be the worst in history. For example, it's not easy raising godly children today, given the moral decline in our culture. However, it wasn't easy in the first century either. Yet the homes of that evil era produced the likes of Timothy, Titus, John Mark, etc. What is the lesson for parents today? Shirley?
Teach them the Word of God, and it will help them through life.
As Shirley said, teach them the Word of God, and it will help them through life. The first thing I thought of was the proverb. But we should do what? Train up in the way he should go, and he won't depart from it. Norm P?
Not change the mission.
I'm sorry, doesn't time, what, the mission?
The time do not change the mission, and the results are in God's hands. If you follow his example, if you follow his teaching, if you follow his word, the same choices are made between every person and God, whether they choose to follow or not. And our job isn't to determine the decision they make. Our job is to deliver the mission that God has given us. Do the teaching, do the instruction. Because like I said, every individual's got to stand accountable. All we can do is the part that God assigned us. And no matter what age we live in, no matter what times we live in, that will never change. And it is something we can always accomplish.
Tom?
The world is full of object lessons, and if you use them, they become great teaching tools for your kids. When you're back together around the kitchen table, you can talk about some of the atrocities that we've seen and point it out as evil. Because if you aren't very clear and explicit, the kids might be considering these alternate lifestyles or the lies that the world is pumping into their heads as possibly true.
That's a good point. Robert?
And while the world's standard is constantly changing, God's standard never changes. And that is something that we've got to lock in on.
And when we look at one of the examples given here, Timothy, what was the constant in Timothy's life?
Godly upbringing.
Yeah, his mother, his grandmother. It says specifically in 2 Timothy 3 that he was trained in the scriptures, like what Shirley said.
Paul referred to him as his son in the faith, and that emphasis of that relationship that they had in faith.
Mm-hmm. It was funny when I was actually doing this lesson. I had the email up, and Jesse's 52 day thing came in. He had the reference from Deuteronomy. Anybody read theirs? Remember what that was? But what are we supposed to do? What did it say to do with our kids? It was teaching them, right? Teaching them the stat about the Lord and His commandments from the time they're little. That's our job. As Norm P. said, that's our mission. And no matter when we live, that's our job as parents, isn't it? To teach our children God's word and His ways. Daniel?
Maybe reframing it too in the mindset of like maybe how Mordecai put it to Esther, like you were put in this time, perhaps for such a time as this, so rise to the challenge instead of saying, oh, this is the worst time ever.
Good point. All right, number 4. Solomon describes the extremes of both workaholics and the lazy. How does he find the balance in verse 6? Read Proverbs 15, 16 and 17, put in your own words of life, wisdom offered there. We talked about this one quite a bit. Does anybody have any further comments? It's that contentment thing, right? The one handful. The Proverbs 15, what I said was enjoy the small things, but make sure you include God. And we've seen that theme popping up several times from Solomon as we've moved through the book. Anybody have anything else they want to add on that one? All right, number 5. The goal of many a college student. I'm going to school so I can get a job, so I can get money, so I can get happy. What has Solomon observed about that mindset? So are you guys going to school to get happy? But to get a job, right? There's nothing wrong with that. We've got to provide for our own. That's something God wants us to do. So what was Solomon's observation about this?
There's no end to the pursuit of wealth, so you will never be happy, never content with if that's your goal.
Exactly.
So learn to have that inner joy, and the contentment comes from inside.
Ken?
Earning a living is certainly a necessary thing, but don't get caught up in thinking that's going to bring you all the happiness that your true happiness.
Yeah, and when we look at what we're taught in the New Testament about giving, what's the point of us working? Part of it. One is to provide for our family. The other is so we can share, isn't it? So we can share. So we can give. So we can share with others that don't have as much as we do. That should be our goal, not this endless just pursuit of wealth and power. Robert?
Paul talked about that when he was talking about no matter what condition he was in Philippians 4:11. Not that I speak in regard to need, for I've learned in whatever state I am to be content. He said, I know how to be abased, I know how to abound. No matter where he was in life, he strove for contentment in that condition he was in.
Exactly. All right, number 6. A poet, Samuel Coleridge, said, "Friendship is like a sheltering tree." In light of verses 9 to 12, what do you think that means? Place of comfort, support, protection. If it's a fruit tree, it'd even be some food. Right? You know, there's lots of things a tree can do. But I think that's a pretty good description, though. Also, when we think about trees, we'll use words like immovable, steadfast, and immovable. We like, a friend we can count on. We want to be able to count on that tree, and we want to go out and sit under it and get some shade, right? And we want to be able to count on our friends as well. And we need to be counted on as a friend. Question 7, discuss someone who befriended you at a low point in your life. What is the best way to repay such kindness? So I want to ask you for discussion, but how can we repay that? Pay it forward. That's the word we use nowadays, isn't it? Go ahead.
Be open about what has happened in your life. Use your own life circumstances that had you so down in the dumps that somebody else was able to be that support for you, and turn around and don't be selfish with your struggles. Turn around and let them be part of what you use in your service to God.
Good point. Yeah, and I mean don't you think that's part of why God, we have the command to assemble. We understand that, but when you look why we're doing that, to promote love for one another, to encourage one another, to share with one another, and to the point that's made, if you've been through something and somebody else is starting to go through it, you have an ability to help them that others may not, right? Norm, right?
There's a reason Jesus, as the master teacher, used stories a lot, and a good story puts perspective. It's like this, and it's something that makes it real. And if you want to be a good teacher, be a good storyteller.
Good point. All right, so final one. We got a minute left. I don't know this song. I don't know even. I think I know who Paul Simon is, but he makes a point here. So when you're down and out, and when you're on the street, when evening falls so hard, I will comfort you. I'll take your part. Oh, when the darkness comes, the pain is all around. Like a bridge over troubled water, I will lay me down. What's the point of those verses, Todd?
I think of what Jesus said, that no greater friend, or no greater love than one lays down his life for his friends, and that's the kind of friend we should be.
All right, well, thanks everybody. We'll pick up with lesson 5 next week.